My name is Amelia, and at 33 years old, I thought I had finally built a stable, independent life for myself. After a decade of nonstop work, I bought my dream home 2 years ago. It's a lovely 2-story house that I absolutely adore. My relationship with my family, on the other hand, has always been complicated, mostly because my parents have always favored my younger sister, Chloe. When Chloe announced she was pregnant, I was genuinely thrilled about becoming an aunt despite our history. But in the weeks that followed, my parents started acting strangely. Nothing, however, could have prepared me for the day they showed up with a moving truck while I was at work. Let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear how this unbelievable betrayal played out. To truly understand the scale of what happened, you need a little bit of my backstory. I worked tirelessly all through college, often juggling 2 part-time jobs while taking a full course load in data science. After graduation, I got an entry-level job at a tech firm and spent the next 5 years clawing my way up the corporate ladder, saving every single dollar I could. By the time I was 31, I had finally scraped together enough for a down payment on my perfect house. It's not a mansion, but it is all mine. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, with a big backyard where I started a vegetable garden last spring. My sanctuary is the master bedroom, which I painted in calming shades of sea foam and cream. I turned one of the other bedrooms into a dedicated home office, a space where I often burn the midnight oil on freelance projects. The third room became a cozy guest room, complete with a small reading nook right by the window. I poured my entire soul into making this house a home, carefully picking out every piece of furniture, painting the walls myself, and creating a space that was a true reflection of me. Professionally, things have been going great. I'm now a lead data scientist at a well-regarded company with excellent benefits and solid job security. I've built a reputation for untangling complex problems and mentoring the junior members of my team. My finances are secure, and I've even started to build a respectable retirement fund. I achieved all of this through my own grit and unwavering determination. Family dynamics in our household have always been, to put it mildly, lopsided. From my earliest memories, my parents made it painfully clear that they preferred Chloe. When we were kids, Chloe always got brand new clothes and the latest toys, while I was given her hand-me-downs. She was signed up for ballet classes while I was told they couldn't possibly afford extracurriculars for both of us. Throughout high school, my parents never missed a single one of Chloe's volleyball games, yet they were consistently too busy to come to my academic awards ceremonies. I vividly remember my 16th birthday, when my parents had promised me a small party with a few friends. The day before, Chloe announced she was desperate to go to a concert, and just like that, my birthday budget was used for her tickets. I ended up with 2 friends eating pizza on my bedroom floor, while my parents drove Chloe and her group to the show. When I tried to voice my disappointment, my mother just said, "Your sister is more outgoing. You understand, don't you?" Another defining moment came when I was applying to college. I had been accepted into several universities, including a prestigious program with a significant scholarship. My parents actively tried to talk me out of going, claiming it was too far away and still too expensive. Just 6 months later, when Chloe was applying to colleges, they took out a second mortgage on their house to finance her education at a pricey private university because, as my father so eloquently put it, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her. Despite this long list of painful memories, I always worked to keep some kind of relationship with them. As we grew into adults, Chloe and I managed to develop a civil, if not close, relationship. I had come to accept that my parents would always see her as the golden child, and I focused on building a life for myself on my own terms. I was finding real fulfillment in my career, my friendships, and my home. About 2 months ago, Chloe announced her pregnancy during a family dinner. She and her husband, Mark, had been married for 3 years, and this would be their first child. In spite of our tangled history, I was genuinely happy for her. A baby felt like a chance for a fresh start, a new joy in the family, and I was excited to become an aunt. Chloe and Mark were living in a small two-bedroom apartment downtown. It wasn't ideal for a growing family, but it was definitely manageable. After her announcement, I offered to help them shop for baby supplies and even hosted a small party at my house to celebrate the news. It was around this time that the first red flags started to pop up. My mother, while helping me clear the table after a dinner, casually mentioned how my house seemed much too large for just one person. A week later, my father walked through my home office, nodding to himself before commenting, "You know, this would make a perfect nursery. It gets all that lovely morning sun." The comments felt odd, but I brushed them off, choosing to focus on supporting Chloe through her pregnancy. I went with her to a baby boutique where we looked at cribs and changing tables. I even bought her a beautiful handcrafted rocking chair as an early gift, for which she seemed genuinely grateful. Looking back now, I should have paid much closer attention to the subtle changes in their behavior. The seeds of what was to come were already being planted, but I was too busy seeing what I wanted to see, a family finally coming together to welcome a new member. Roughly 6 weeks after the pregnancy announcement, I got a strange call from Chloe. She asked me to confirm my exact street address, saying it was for a surprise delivery. This immediately seemed weird, since she had been to my house dozens of times and definitely knew where I lived. When I pressed her on it, she got flustered and quickly changed the subject to her latest ultrasound. At the next family dinner, I noticed Chloe and my parents whispering together in the kitchen. They went quiet the moment I walked in to help with dessert. My mother suddenly became intensely focused on cutting a pie, while my father took a deep and sudden interest in his phone. Chloe avoided my gaze completely. "Everything okay in here?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Of course, sweetie," my mother replied a little too quickly. "Chloe was just telling us about her doctor's appointment yesterday." The air felt thick with tension, but I couldn't figure out why. The rest of the evening was a performance of forced small talk, with an undercurrent of secrecy that left me feeling more and more uneasy. The following weekend, my parents showed up at my house unannounced. This was unusual. They always called before coming over. My father was carrying a tape measure, which he claimed was for a project at their house, yet he started measuring the doorways and several rooms in my house. "Dad, what on earth are you doing?" I asked, as he measured the width of my home office door. "Just curious," he answered vaguely, "seeing if standard doors are the same width in newer homes as they are in ours." Meanwhile, my mother was taking pictures of my living room and kitchen with her phone. When I asked her about it, she said she was getting ideas for redecorating their guest room. The explanation made absolutely no sense, as their house has a completely different layout and style. Before they left, my father asked some pointed questions about my mortgage interest rate and whether I had considered how much equity I'd built. My mother chimed in again, remarking on how a single person really doesn't need this much space. Their behavior left a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Later that evening, I called my best friend, Sarah, to vent about my worries. "It sounds like they're planning something." "Amelia?" Sarah said after I told her about the bizarre events, "and I have a bad feeling you're not going to like it." The next day, I was using my parents' iPad, which they'd left at my house, to look up a recipe when a notification popped up. It was an email confirming a real estate viewing appointment for a studio apartment downtown. The contact information listed was my father's phone number. A cold dread washed over me. Why would my parents be looking at studio apartments? I checked the browser history and my stomach twisted even more. I found multiple searches for studio apartments near downtown, how to help a family member downsize, and legal rights of homeowners versus family members. When I confronted my parents over the phone about what I'd found, my mother became defensive. "We were just doing some research. Your father and I are thinking about downsizing ourselves," she said, her voice unconvincing. "Then why does the appointment confirmation have a note that says, 'Perfect for Amelia?'" I shot back. The line went silent for a long moment before my mother sighed heavily. "Honey, we just think that with Chloe having the baby, it might make more sense for everyone if you moved somewhere. More appropriate for your lifestyle. That big house is just wasted on you." I was so stunned I couldn't speak. They had been actively planning to move me out of my own home without even talking to me about it. When I finally found my voice, I told them in no uncertain terms that I had zero intention of moving and that they needed to respect my boundaries and my property. "You're being selfish," my father cut in. "Family is supposed to help family. Chloe needs space for the baby." That same evening, Chloe called me, crying about how there wasn't enough room in her apartment for all the baby furniture they wanted. "We just don't know where we'll put everything," she sobbed. "The nursery barely fits a crib and a changing table, let alone the glider and a dresser and a toy chest." Wanting to be supportive, despite my growing alarm, I offered a compromise. "I could store some items for you temporarily in my guest room if you need. But Chloe, I need you to understand this would be a temporary solution." "That's so sweet of you." Chloe's voice suddenly brightened. "We'll figure out the details later." Something about her rapid shift in mood left me deeply uneasy. When I tried to establish clearer boundaries about what exactly I was offering, she quickly ended the call, claiming she had another one coming in. My parents called the next day, and when I tried to bring up my concerns about their apartment hunting, they completely dismissed me. "You're overthinking things," my mother said dismissively. "We were just exploring options. All families make sacrifices for each other," my father added. "When you have your own children someday, you'll understand." These conversations left me riddled with anxiety, and I struggled to sleep. I started having nightmares about coming home to find all my belongings on the curb and strangers living inside my house. The stress began to bleed into my work. I found myself obsessively checking my home security app throughout the day. The whole situation felt surreal. How could my own family be plotting to evict me from my home? I started to wonder if I was overreacting, but every new interaction only confirmed my suspicion that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. After a particularly stressful week of dodging my family's calls, I had to travel out of state for a business conference. The 2-day trip couldn't have come at a worse time, but rescheduling would have jeopardized a major client relationship. Before I left, I double-checked all the locks and set my security system. When I returned on Sunday evening, I was horrified to find a stack of flattened moving boxes leaning against my front porch. Tucked into the top one was a note from my mother. "Thought these might be helpful. Love, Mom." My hands were shaking with rage as I immediately called my parents. "What are these boxes doing at my house?" I demanded when my father answered. "Your mother just thought she'd help you get a head start on packing," he replied casually, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. "We found a great studio downtown for you. Hardwood floors, walking distance to restaurants. It's perfect for your lifestyle." "Dad, I am not moving," I stated, my voice firm. "I never agreed to any of this. This is my house. I bought it with my own money." "Now, Amelia," he said, using that condescending tone he'd used on me since I was a child, "be reasonable. Chloe needs a proper family home for the baby. You're single, with no children. This just makes sense for everyone." Before I could respond, I received a text from Chloe. It was a series of photos of an elaborate nursery furniture set. The message read, "Just ordered this. Can't wait to set it up at your place next weekend." My heart pounded in my chest. I ended the call with my father and sank onto my couch, trying to process what was happening. This had moved beyond strange behavior. My family was actively planning to take over my home without my consent. The next morning, I called in sick to work and began a frantic search through my emails for any communication between my parents and me about the house. I unearthed several disturbing messages I had either missed or forgotten. In one, my mother had asked for a digital copy of my house key in case of emergencies. In another, my father had inquired about the name of my mortgage company for tax purposes. Most alarmingly, I found an email chain between my parents and Chloe that I had been blind copied on, presumably by accident. The subject line read, "Amelia's House Transition Plan." It contained detailed discussions about how Amelia's house is perfect for a growing family, and how they would help her see that this is the best solution for everyone. There was mention of a lease agreement for a studio apartment and a timeline to move me out gradually over the next month. My sister had even written, "The master bedroom has perfect lighting for nursing, and the backyard is exactly what we want for when the baby starts crawling." With a growing sense of dread, I checked my mailbox. Inside, I found a letter from a property management company I didn't recognize. It was a lease agreement for a studio apartment, with what appeared to be my signature forged at the bottom. They had gone so far as to create fraudulent documents in my name. That evening, Chloe came by unannounced, claiming she wanted to check on me after hearing I was sick. Once inside, she quickly revealed her true motive. "So have you started packing yet? Mom said she dropped off some boxes yesterday." I took a deep breath, deciding directness was my only remaining option. "Chloe, I am not moving. This is my house. I am not giving it to you." Her friendly demeanor vanished instantly. "But we already put a deposit down on that studio for you. It's really nice, you know, and Mark and I need more space now that the baby's on the way." "That's not my problem," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry you don't have enough space, but that doesn't give you the right to take my home." Chloe's face hardened. "You don't need all this space anyway. It's just you. We're going to be a family of 3. "I need you to leave," I said, moving toward the door. "You are being incredibly selfish," she snapped. "After everything our parents have done for you, you can't even do this one thing to help the family? Think about your niece or nephew." After Chloe left, my parents called. They tag-teamed me, alternating between guilt-tripping and outright anger, even suggesting I was mentally unstable for not wanting to help the family. When I stood my ground, they resorted to the silent treatment, with my mother tearfully saying they would give me time to come to my senses. The stress began to take a serious physical toll. I lost weight, I couldn't concentrate at work, and I jumped every time my phone rang. My coworkers noticed something was off, and my manager, Jessica, pulled me aside to ask if everything was okay. "Family issues," I explained vaguely, unwilling to admit the full, bizarre situation. Jessica looked concerned. "Whatever it is, take care of yourself. And please, let me know if you need any time off." That evening, I sat in my home office surrounded by the life I had built for myself. The thought of being pushed out to make way for my sister filled me with a mixture of profound sadness and steely determination. I would not be bullied out of my own home, not even by my own family. It was time to set firm, unbreakable boundaries, no matter how painful the consequences might be. 3 days after the confrontation with Chloe, I was in a meeting at work when my phone started buzzing repeatedly. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, which was unusual during work hours. Worried, I stepped out to take the call. "Amelia, there's a delivery truck outside your house," Mrs. Gable said, her voice tense. "They're unloading baby furniture. Your parents are here, directing them where to put everything inside. I thought you should know. My blood ran cold." "I'll be right there," I managed to say before rushing to my manager's office to explain I had a home emergency. The 20-minute drive felt like an eternity. As I turned onto my street, I saw the scene exactly as Mrs. Gable had described. A large delivery truck was parked in my driveway, its back doors wide open. Beside it was a rental moving truck I'd never seen before. My parents' car was on the street along with Chloe and Mark's SUV. I parked haphazardly and sprinted toward my house. The front door was ajar and 2 delivery men were carrying a white crib through it. Inside, I found a scene that made me freeze in my tracks. My parents were in my living room directing traffic as if they owned the place. Chloe and Mark were in my guest room, which had been partially emptied of my belongings. Mark was applying a fresh coat of baby blue paint to one of the walls. "What is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mix of shock and rage. My mother turned, her face lighting up as if this were a delightful surprise. "Amelia, you're home early. Surprise, we're helping you move this weekend. Isn't it wonderful?" "The studio is all ready for you," my father added. "We've packed most of your essentials already. The moving truck is nearly loaded." I pushed past them and went to my garage. Sure enough, it was filled with boxes scribbled with my name. They had been packing up my life while I was at work. "How did you get in?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "We had a key made from that copy you gave us for emergencies," my mother explained breezily. "We've been getting things ready all week while you were at your job." I stumbled back to the guest room where Chloe was now arranging stuffed animals on a shelf that had, until that morning, held my book collection. My books were nowhere in sight. "Where are my things?" I asked. "We packed up your important stuff," Chloe replied without looking at me. "Some of the decorative items we donated, since the studio is so much smaller. But don't worry, we kept all the family photos and sentimental things." I stood there, frozen, as her words sank in. They had been in my house without permission, going through my belongings, making decisions about what I should keep and what should be discarded. The violation felt physical, like a punch to the gut. Mark looked up from his painting, seeming to notice my distress for the first time. "The nursery is going to look great. We really appreciate you doing this for us, Amelia." "I never agreed to this," I said, finally finding my voice. "I never said you could have my house." My father entered the room, his expression stern. "Now, Amelia, we've been over this. This is what's best for the family. Chloe needs a proper home for the baby." "I did not agree to anything," I shouted, my composure finally shattering. "This is my house. You can't just decide to take it." "Lower your voice," my mother scolded. "You're being dramatic. We found you a lovely studio apartment. Many single people live in much less space." Chloe placed a hand on her pregnant belly, her go-to move when she wanted to win an argument. "Think about the baby, Amelia. Do you really want your niece or nephew growing up in a cramped apartment when there's a perfectly good house available? This house is available because I bought it," I shot back. "With my money, that I earned. None of you have any right to be here moving my things without my permission." My father stepped closer, his voice dropping to the authoritative tone he used to control me as a child. "You have two choices, Amelia. You can be a good sister and aunt and accept this transition gracefully, or you can continue this selfish behavior and be cut off from the family. Is that what you want? To never see your niece or nephew?" The ultimatum hung in the air. A delivery man awkwardly squeezed past us, carrying what looked like parts of a changing table. From my bedroom, I could hear my mother opening and closing drawers. The room began to spin as the sheer magnitude of their betrayal hit me. My own family had conspired against me, entered my home without my knowledge, packed and discarded my possessions, and were now threatening to disown me if I didn't surrender everything I had worked for. I felt my chest tighten, my breathing growing shallow. Recognizing the start of a panic attack, I steadied myself against the doorframe. Chloe watched me with what looked like irritation, not concern. "Are you seriously going to make this about you right now?" she asked. "I'm 7 months pregnant. This stress isn't good for the baby." Something inside me snapped at that moment. The last thread of familial obligation. I realized these people didn't care about my well-being or my rights. They saw me only as a resource to be exploited for Chloe's benefit. I walked into my bedroom to find my mother sorting through my jewelry box. Scattered across my bed were photos, keepsakes, and personal mementos she had deemed worthy of saving. The rest of my possessions were either in boxes or apparently gone forever. This was the final straw. No more reasoning, no more pleading, no more hoping they would see my side. It was time to take action. With shaking hands, I took out my phone and dialed 911. "What are you doing?" my mother asked, her eyes widening as she realized who I was calling. "I need to report people in my home without permission, removing my property," I told the dispatcher, my voice surprisingly steady. I gave my address and confirmed that I was the homeowner. "The police? Really, Amelia?" My father scoffed. "Don't be ridiculous." I ignored him and continued speaking with the dispatcher, who assured me that officers would arrive shortly. After ending the call, I turned to face my family. "You all need to stop what you're doing right now," I stated firmly. "You are trespassing in my home and attempting to remove my property without consent. That is illegal. Family? My mother exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. Family helps each other. Family doesn't steal from each other, I countered. Family doesn't forge signatures on lease agreements or make copies of keys without permission. Chloe began to cry, her hands cradling her belly. I can't believe you would do this to me in my condition. Do you want me to lose the baby from stress? Even in my rage, I recognized the manipulation for what it was. Chloe had been using her fragile state to get her way since we were kids, long before she was actually pregnant. The delivery men need to take all the baby furniture back, I said calmly, and everyone needs to stop packing my things immediately. Mark, looking increasingly uncomfortable, put down his paint roller. Maybe we should go, he muttered to Chloe, who shot him a venomous look. We're not going anywhere, she snapped. This is going to be our house. Amelia is just having one of her selfish moments. My father puffed out his chest. The police will side with us when they understand the situation. A pregnant woman needs a proper home more than a single woman needs excess space. Despite his confident words, I saw him nervously checking his watch. My mother had started hurriedly putting items back into my jewelry box, as if erasing the evidence of her invasion. 15 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. Officer Davis and Officer Miller introduced themselves and asked everyone to gather in the living room. The delivery men, sensing the charged atmosphere, had retreated to their truck to wait. "Can you explain what's happening here, ma'am?" Officer Davis asked me. Taking a deep breath, I explained the situation as clearly and factually as I could. I showed them the deed to my house, explained that I had never given anyone permission to move my belongings, and told them my signature had been forged on a lease agreement for an apartment I had never seen. My parents immediately jumped in, talking over each other in an attempt to paint me as emotionally unstable and ungrateful. Our daughter is having some emotional problems, my father explained confidentially to Officer Miller. She agreed to this arrangement weeks ago and is just now changing her mind. We're just trying to help everyone in the family. She's always been jealous of her sister, my mother added. This is just another attempt to hurt Chloe during her pregnancy. Chloe, right on cue, began sobbing dramatically. I don't understand why she hates me and the baby so much, she wailed. We just need a safe place for our child. Officer Davis remained impassive as she turned back to me. Do you have documentation showing you are the legal owner of this property? I retrieved my deed and recent mortgage statements from my home office, along with identification proving I was the person named on the documents. The officers reviewed them carefully. And did you give verbal or written permission for your family to move your belongings or bring in new furniture? Officer Miller asked. Absolutely not, I stated firmly. I have repeatedly told them I have no intention of giving up my home. They entered without my knowledge while I was at work, using a key they had made without my permission. The officers conferred briefly before addressing the room. Officer Davis spoke first. Based on the documentation and statements, Miss Amelia is the legal owner of this property. Without her explicit permission, removing her belongings or making alterations to the property constitutes trespassing and potentially theft. But we're her parents, my mother protested. That does not grant you legal rights to her property, Officer Miller explained patiently. As the homeowner, Miss Amelia has the right to decide who can enter her home and under what circumstances. My father tried to argue further, but the officers stood firm. They informed my family that they needed to leave the premises immediately, return any keys they had made, and cease all attempts to remove my property. The baby furniture would have to be returned to the delivery company, and all of my belongings already loaded onto the moving truck would need to be brought back inside. Chloe made one last dramatic appeal, clutching her belly and claiming the stress might send her into early labor. Officer Davis, unimpressed, offered to call an ambulance if she felt she needed medical attention. That won't be necessary, Chloe muttered, suddenly recovering from her distress. Under the officer's supervision, my parents, Chloe, and Mark gathered their personal items. The delivery men were instructed to take the baby furniture back. My father was forced to unlock the moving truck, revealing boxes of my life that now had to be returned to the house. As they prepared to leave, my mother approached me, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe you would do this to your own family," she whispered. "What will people think when they hear you called the police on your pregnant sister?" "I didn't call the police on Chloe," I replied calmly. "I called them on people who were trying to steal my home and my belongings. If you're concerned about how this looks, perhaps you should have considered that before breaking into my house." The officers remained until my family had left and the delivery truck had departed. They advised me to change my locks immediately and to document any further attempts by my family to enter my property without permission. They also suggested I might want to consider a restraining order if the harassment continued. After everyone was gone, I stood in my partially disassembled home, surrounded by boxes and the faint smell of wet paint in my guest room. The silence was deafening after the chaos of the day. Despite the mess, I felt a profound sense of relief. I had stood up for myself. I had protected what was mine. That evening, my neighbor Mrs. Gable came by with a homemade lasagna and a bottle of wine. "Thought you might not feel like cooking," she said kindly, "and I figured you could use a friend right now." As we sat in my kitchen eating dinner, I felt the first tentative moments of peace. The road ahead would be difficult, navigating the family fallout, restoring my home, processing the betrayal. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. "Thank you for calling me today," I told Mrs. Gable. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That's what real support looks like," she said, "not taking but protecting what matters to someone." That night, after installing new high-security locks on all my doors, I slept in my own bed, in my own home, secure in the knowledge that I had finally established boundaries that not even my family could cross. The day after the police intervention, the texts and calls began flooding in. My parents alternated between furious tirades and tearful pleas. Chloe sent long, guilt-inducing messages about how I had ruined everything for her baby. Extended family members who had clearly heard a carefully edited version of events called to express their shock at my cruelty. I let most calls go to voicemail, needing time to process my own emotions before engaging. The few texts I did reply to were brief and factual. I did not call the police on Chloe. I called them because people were removing my belongings from my home without my permission. 3 days after the incident, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was my Aunt Carol, my father's sister, whom I had always been fond of but rarely saw due to geographical distance. "Amelia, honey, I heard there was some drama," she said when I answered. "Your mother called me in tears, but her story had some holes in it. Want to tell me your side?" For the first time since the ordeal began, I felt safe enough to share the full story with a family member. Aunt Carol listened without interruption, only occasionally making sounds of disbelief. "This does not surprise me one bit," she sighed when I finished. "Your father and mother have always had boundary issues. They did something similar to your cousin Mark years ago, trying to pressure him into letting your grandmother move into his condo. He refused and was labeled the bad grandson for months. Her validation was like cool water on a burn." "So you don't think I overreacted by calling the police?" I asked hesitantly. "Honey, they broke into your house and were stealing your things. What were you supposed to do? Help them load the truck?" Her matter-of-fact response made me laugh for the first time in weeks. Before ending the call, Aunt Carol promised to try to talk some sense into my parents, though she wasn't optimistic. "They believe they are entitled to control their children's lives, no matter how old you get. This was never about Chloe needing a bigger place. This was about them asserting control over you." Her words stayed with me as I scheduled an appointment with a therapist specializing in family dynamics. During our first session, Dr. Evans helped me understand that my feelings of guilt were a programmed response to setting healthy boundaries. "Your family trained you to put their needs above your own," she explained. "When you assert your legitimate rights, they respond with escalating pressure to force you back into compliance. This is not healthy or normal family behavior. Over the next few weeks, I worked with Dr. Evans to process my complex emotions and establish strategies for maintaining those boundaries. Meanwhile, the situation with my family continued to evolve. 2 weeks after the incident, my parents showed up at my workplace unannounced. They approached the reception desk asking to see me, claiming it was a family emergency. Fortunately, my manager, Jessica, intercepted them. "Your daughter is in meetings all day," she informed them smoothly. "Despite knowing I was at my desk, I'd be happy to have her call you when she's available." When they refused to leave, Jessica had security escort them from the building. She came to my desk afterward, her expression full of concern. "Are you having serious family problems?" she asked gently, because that did not look like normal parent behavior. I briefly explained the situation, embarrassed but grateful for her support. "Take whatever time you need to sort this out," she said firmly, "and let me know if you need help with a restraining order. My sister is a lawyer who specializes in family issues." Taking Jessica up on her offer, I consulted with her sister, Maria, who helped me draft a cease and desist letter to my parents. The letter formally requested they stop entering my property, attempting to remove my belongings, or contacting my workplace. Maria warned me that such letters often don't deter determined family members, but it would establish a paper trail if I needed legal protection in the future. The letter had an unexpected effect. Rather than deterring my parents, it seemed to shock them into realizing the seriousness of the situation. 3 days after they received it, my father called with a different tone. "We may have overstepped," he admitted grudgingly. "We were only trying to help Chloe, but perhaps we should have discussed it with you more thoroughly." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest I'd gotten to an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. I responded carefully, explaining that overstepped was a significant understatement for what they had done, and that rebuilding trust would require them to respect my clearly stated boundaries. The conversation ended without resolution, but it felt like a tiny step toward a new kind of relationship, one where I held firm, and they began to recognize my boundaries as legitimate. A few days later, I received a surprising text from Mark, Chloe's husband. He asked if we could meet for coffee without Chloe or my parents knowing. Curious and cautious, I agreed. Mark looked exhausted when he arrived, with dark circles under his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Amelia," he said, staring into his coffee. "I never felt right about the plan, but Chloe and your parents were so convinced it was the only solution that I went along with it. Watching you come home and find us in your house, I've never felt more ashamed." His sincerity caught me off guard. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. He ran a hand through his hair. "Because I realized I don't want to raise our child in an environment where boundaries mean nothing, and taking what isn't yours is justified as family helping family. Those aren't the values I want to teach." Mark explained that since the incident, Chloe and my parents had been obsessively searching for other houses, rejecting perfectly good options because they weren't as nice as mine. Their entitled attitude had forced him to see things from a new perspective. "I'm trying to talk sense into Chloe," he said. "She's still angry, but I think once the baby comes, her focus will shift. At least I hope so." Our conversation gave me a glimmer of hope that at least one person in my family circle understood the importance of respect. Before leaving, Mark asked if I would be willing to meet with Chloe once things calmed down. I agreed to consider it, recognizing that my relationship with my future niece or nephew was worth attempting reconciliation, even if it had to be on new terms. 2 weeks later, I received a text from Chloe asking if we could talk. We met at a neutral park. Chloe was now nearly 8 months pregnant, and despite my lingering anger, I felt a pang seeing her struggle to lower herself onto the bench. The conversation was difficult. She oscillated between remorse and justification. "I still think you could have helped us out," she said at one point, but Mark made me see that trying to take your house without permission was wrong. It wasn't full accountability, but it was a start. We ended the meeting with a tentative agreement to begin rebuilding our relationship, with the understanding that it would look different. I would be an aunt to her child, but my home was permanently off limits as a solution to her housing problems. As for my parents, they made several attempts at reconciliation, though none included a genuine acknowledgement of how severely they had violated my trust. Their idea of making amends was to suggest we all just move forward. Dr. Evans helped me see that without true accountability, reconciliation would only set me up for future boundary violations. I decided to maintain limited contact with them, with clear guidelines about what topics were open for discussion and what behaviors would result in me ending the communication. It was painful but necessary. Throughout this period, I found unexpected support. Co-workers invited me to dinners, neighbors checked in. I began to see that family could be something you create, not just something you're born into. As the weeks passed, I reclaimed my home, repainting the wall in my guest room, reorganizing my belongings, and adding new security features. Each act of restoration helped heal the sense of violation. My house became not just a home again, but a symbol of my independence and self-respect. 6 months after the moving truck incident, my life had found a new equilibrium. My home was once again my sanctuary. The journey hadn't been easy. There were nights I questioned if standing up to my family was worth the pain, moments I nearly gave in to the pressure to just apologize. But with each passing week, my resolve strengthened. One Tuesday, I was grocery shopping when I nearly bumped my cart into Chloe's. She had her newborn daughter, Lily, in a carrier. We both froze. "Hi," I said, breaking the silence. "Hi," she replied. This is Lily. She's 3 weeks old." Despite everything, I felt a surge of emotion looking at my niece's tiny face. "She's beautiful," I said sincerely. Chloe hesitated, then asked, "Would you like to hold her?" I carefully took the sleeping infant, marveling at her perfect features. In that moment, I knew I wanted a relationship with this child, even if it meant finding a way forward with Chloe. "We found a house," Chloe said as I handed Lily back. "It's not as nice as yours, but it has 3 bedrooms and a small yard." "That's great," I said, genuinely happy for them. Before parting, we exchanged tentative smiles and agreed to text about a visit. It was a small step. My relationship with my parents remains more complicated. They still struggle with my boundaries, often testing them with comments like, "When are you going to get over that silly moving incident?" Dr. Evans helped me develop direct responses. It wasn't a silly incident. It was a serious violation of my home and trust. Over time, I've noticed small signs of progress. Through therapy, I recognized how their treatment had led me to doubt my own perceptions, a pattern Dr. Evans identified as gaslighting. I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was essential. Most importantly, I discovered that standing up for myself didn't make me a bad daughter or sister. It made me a healthy adult. As spring arrived, I redecorated. The guest room that was nearly a nursery became a creative space for my photography hobby. I planted new flowers in the garden. Each change reinforced that this was my space. Slowly, I began dating again. I met David, a kind engineer who demonstrated respect for my space from our first date. When I eventually told him the story, his shocked reaction helped confirm that my experience had been extreme. In a healthy family, no one would ever think they had the right to take your home. He said simply, "That's not love, that's control." 8 months after the incident, I received an invitation to Lily's christening. After careful consideration, I decided to attend. The day was tense but manageable. Aunt Carol stayed by my side, a silent ally. Chloe made an effort to include me, asking me to take photos. As I watched Lily, I reflected on what kind of aunt I wanted to be, someone who showed her the importance of self-respect, who demonstrated that love doesn't require self-sacrifice. In the years since that terrible day, I have learned profound lessons about family, love, and self-worth. I learned that true family love includes respect for autonomy. I realized that building the life you want sometimes means protecting it from the people who claim to love you. Today, my home remains my sanctuary, earned through hard work and protected through courage. My relationships with my family continue to evolve, and I have found a sense of peace I never knew was possible, now that I have finally given myself permission to define what family means on my own terms. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who felt entitled to your space or possessions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember that establishing healthy boundaries is not selfish. It is an act of self-respect that ultimately creates the foundation for genuine relationships. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps anyone facing similar challenges to find the courage to stand up for themselves. End of story.